Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Cherie Best. You're listening to the Just Love Them podcast, where we talk about finding understanding and peace with those we have loved who've made different religious choices than we have. Today, I have joining me Chad Shober. Chad grew up in the Church of the Nazarene and loved going to church. From a very young age, he has had a connection to the spiritual world and felt the call of God in his life. However, because of many theological questions, childhood trauma, and emotional pain, that call was not always easy to follow. For Chad, the spiritual world was a place to hide and feel safe. No longer feeling safe at the church, he eventually left the Church of the Nazarene. Through his tenacity for searching for answers and his hunger for growth, Chad finally found healing and peace when he realized that God lives inside all of us and not somewhere far away in heaven. Chad, welcome.
Thank you. It sounds so much better when you say it than when I wrote it.
You did a great job. I am super excited to have you on the program because most of the people that I've had on so far come from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's what's predominant in my area where I live. And so when you reached out to me to talk about being on the program, it just felt like such a beautiful fit. And I'm just so excited that you reached out and that you're here today.
Well, you're welcome. I'm honored to be here, and I love your title of the show. Just love them, because that's really what it's about.
It really
It
is.
it is. So
Yeah. Well, I would love for you to kind of tell us about your religious journey.
okay. Well, like you mentioned, I grew up in the Church of the Nazarene, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail what their faith is and all that. That's just going to take up too much time. So people can very easily Google them and find them and get a little background on it. But anyway, my parents weren't already Nazarenes when I was born. They were part of a church, but they were transitioning and looking for something. And so I think I was probably two or three maybe by the time my parents started going to the Nazarene church. It's like I like to tell my friends or tell other people, it's like I popped out of the womb excited about God. I mean, I don't know how else to
I
explain it
love that.
and I just wanted to be connected all the time. And so my dad was the church organist for 20 some years, and so we were, as when the church doors were unlocked, we were there.
Wow.
And I was content with that. I was happy because when I was at church, I felt connected. When I wasn't at church, I didn't feel as connected. Yeah, and then as I grew up, as I got older and wanting to be a pastor, I was there almost every single day. I mean,
Wow.
it was an addiction almost, because I just wanted to be there. I wanted to learn as much as I could. I wanted to know how to be a pastor. Thought the only way to do that was to watch and listen and to the older people, the older pastors, and you know take tips from them and everything else. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So, but what was going on for me inside is I was feeling all this, being able to see the spiritual world. I was feeling all this love inside and from my creator, my God, but not experiencing it all the time with those around me. Because of being a sensitive person, I didn't quite understand what was going on, but I was having a physical, emotional reaction to that. It's like, why am I not getting from the people around me what I'm also feeling with God? And then with my home life, it was a very traumatic upbringing. I don't feel like I need to go into detail in this part, but it was not a safe place. And so my spiritual world became a place where I escaped to. It was
Wow.
my sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't use it for anything else but that. And so every time I felt attacked, whether it was at family, at home, or being bullied at school, or whatever, if I didn't feel safe, that was my go-to. That's the place I escaped there. I got quiet, I got silent, and I didn't often share what I was experiencing inside in the spiritual realm.
Yeah, because that probably also wasn't safe to share.
You got it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I was growing up in fear because of the trauma, because of wanting to share what was happening for me, but too afraid to share it because it wasn't accepted. And then a couple times that I did share it, I'd tell people I see angels or I see this, and they'd be like, well, no, that's not possible. Only people from the Bible can share. But we also know who you are, Chad, and that just doesn't make sense. Those type of things. And I don't fault them for that. And I don't have no anger for that. They didn't know, you know, and they were only living their lives best they could and based on what they knew. So I'm aware that was going on. I didn't know at the time, but I know that now.
Yeah.
And so it became this safe place for all of my life. And I share this quite often because I've heard people relate to it when I do share it. I felt this dark emptiness from my throat all the way down to my stomach, just this dark abyss of loneliness and emotional pain, and I didn't know how to get out of it. And it would temporarily go away when I was on my knees praying or when I was crying out to God. In those moments, it would go away, but it didn't last
Mm.
because I was always, again, God is in heaven. God is out there. That's what the message I was hearing. And so how do I get there? That's what I was,
Oh,
how
yeah.
do I get there so that I feel better, so that I feel whole? And then again, when I also would ask questions theologically or in Sunday school class, very shy, very scared to ask those questions, but I got the nerve to share it. It wasn't always received.
So you would ask questions, but you were shut down, or what happened?
Yes, it wasn't received in a very loving way. I don't know if I want to say it was shut down. It probably was, but I'm not sure. As I'm talking, I want to be very respectful to the people of the past.
Sure.
I think that's very, very important.
I agree.
Um, and then we don't often talk about that. We talk about her story, and then I don't want any finger pointing going on because that's not what I'm trying to say at all. But yes, so what you said there, I was shut down. It wasn't received in love. They received it the best they could. They gave the answers that they were given. The classic one, you got the Adam and Eve story and the Cain and Abel, and Cain kills Abel, and then all of a sudden he's told he'll find his wife out there. Well, where did his wife come from? Because we were told there was only Cain and Abel and Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Those type of questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a child
You
would,
just wanted, you were seeking understanding. Yes.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so then I'm feeling called to be a pastor. I'm feeling called to be in ordained ministry, and I'm excited. I'm wanting this despite the emotional pain I'm feeling, despite not feeling like I'm always being received by my peers or other people because of what I'm questioning or whatever. And so I went to a Nazarene college, and I was excited. I was ready to go, but academics were a real struggle for me. They did not come easy. And so my freshman year academically was a huge struggle. I got to my junior year of college, and I was doing an internship at a local church. I was taking church history class, I was taking New Testament class, and there I felt more freedom to ask. But again, it still wasn't always received.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently just reconnected with my church history professor, and we had a wonderful conversation. Wonderful conversation. And he says, "Oh, I remember your questions. They always made me think." But he said, "I always knew you were taking everything in that I said." And so I loved having you in class, and that big smile you had all the time, just it always spoke to me, and I loved having you there. So anyway, I say all that to say he shared with me a couple weeks ago when we talked that even though your questions weren't answered, I love that you brought your questions in class. But it left me feeling empty. It left me feeling having more questions. This doesn't make sense to me, especially when we talked about the formation of the church and how that all came to be. Something in me for myself did not feel right. And so I ended up leaving college, leaving that college, and it wasn't a couple of years later that I actually ended up leaving the Nazarene church altogether. I went to the Episcopal church, and that was the first time I felt like I was home in a
Wow.
church. It
Yeah.
spoke to me. I love the pageantry of the Catholic Mass, the Episcopal Mass, even to this day, even though I still don't go to church, I love that pageantry. If they did it without words, it'd be even better for me. But that's that's another conversation. So I'm searching, I'm seeking. I'm in my mid 20s, 30s at this point, and I am really in a state of depression. And I thought all my life that I was going to be a pastor, and now I'm not studying to be a pastor anymore. I'm not even in college at this point. And I'm going, okay, God, what do I do? What do I do? And I am trying to figure out how to have a stable income, how to have a job, what that all means, at the same time being extra sensitive to emotions, to vibrations, to feelings, all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was not able to sort through it. It was a nightmare for me. And if I can, I'm a writer. I write, I used to write things back in those days. And if I kind of like to share one a short poem that
Absolutely.
I wrote to God. It's called A Love Letter to the Divine. My soul aches for your touch, your lingering embrace, and your soft caress. To be one with you is what I desire. Cradle me in your arms so I know that I am loved. Take my hand in yours and remind me who I am. Touch me with a love that can only come from you. Consume me with your light so that I may be whole. I desired that. I wanted that. And even though I knew at the time I was a Christian, I didn't feel it. Even in my theology classes, we often heard you can't talk about God without talking about love. God is love. Love is God. But I wasn't experiencing it. Now, in my own spiritual world, when I would go inward, yes, absolutely, I was experiencing it, but I wasn't experiencing outside of myself. And there was the confusion.
Yeah.
So fast forward to 2014, I was ready to commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
I was that low. And I ended up going to Spain and hiking El Camino de Santiago. Ended up doing that a total of 5 times. I fell in love with it. But that's when I started going inward. Because what the Camino, if anyone's hiked that trail or they're familiar with it, you start to realize what you're bringing into this world that's not working. You also it starts with your backpack because the first time you overpack. And so you're carrying this incredible weight on your shoulders, and it's a symbol for life. How much are we carrying that we don't need to carry? Our
Ooh,
bodies are not meant to carry all this emotional baggage that we put on ourselves.
I absolutely love that.
I think if we did, God would have created our bodies for that. But then where does God fall into that? That's a whole other conversation too. But we carry these heavy loads because we've never been there before. We don't know what it's going to be. How often can we wash our clothes? How often do we do this? So we're carrying this heavy load, and as we're going, we're getting rid of things. And even things that we brought with us that we thought were important, and we get on the trail and go, well, I really don't need this. Am I going to need it later? I don't know that I am. And you see some parts of the trail, you see it lined with people that empty their packs.
Oh,
Or when you get into bigger towns, you see these trash cans overloaded with stuff. You know, wasn't quite ready to go inward yet, though. I knew I needed to. I know I wanted to, but in that moment, I wasn't ready. So during that time, though, I ended up living in Spain for 4 years, and I was learning about meditation, was learning about yoga. These were helping my internal body calm down in a way that I'd never experienced before, in a way that I'd never experienced at church. The other thing that I kept hearing was go back to the breath. If you lose, your mind goes elsewhere or you're having a difficult time maintaining the yoga position, just breathe.
just breathe.
And that started to calm me down. And then I started to remember the word pneuma that I learned in church history. Pneuma in Christian tradition, for those who don't know, is the breath of God. And in Christian theology, it's the breath of God that was breathed into us. And when I started to make that connection, I started to feel calm, a calmness that I'd never experienced in my life inside prior to this. That was kind of the first step to breath and breathing and what that means. And maybe there's a connection for God here. And then I started looking at Hinduism and Buddhism and they're also talking about the breath. But it actually wasn't until till 2 years ago where I made the connection that, okay, if we're all talking about breath, These major religions are talking about breathing and focusing on the breath. And then in the Christian tradition, we're talking about pneuma. Does that mean God's in us? I'm not saying that I'm God.
No.
I'm saying, is God in me? And I remember, okay, well, the sinner's prayer. We're inviting Jesus Christ into our hearts. Is there something going on here? So put that on the back burner for a moment. I began to feel different with this. I wasn't quite feeling whole or at peace, but my body was calming down. And then when I moved back to the States, I came across a book that is controversial, but it transformed my life, called The Course in Miracles. And I know people want to argue, well, about channeling and about Jesus channeling it and this or that. And I don't care about any of that. What it did for me was stop looking on the outside of me, stop looking at everyone getting it wrong, stop looking at people hurting me, stop looking at myself as the victim. It made me stop looking at Cherie to get it right or my parents to get it right, but for me to get it right. It made me look at life and go, what am I bringing to the table? Because when I'm in that moment of pain, I'm reacting to that pain, but I'm also reacting to the person that's in front of me that I think is causing me the pain. And I maybe go, okay, what is my behavior when I'm reacting to how I feel and being treated?
Yeah. And because otherwise you're just in victim mode, you're in blame mode, and it makes you
That's yes,
powerless. Because if you're being acted upon and you're the victim, you are powerless.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the piece I was missing. And going back to the breath, going back to God breathing in us. If I am his child and I was created from his power, how powerful am I then? That's the connection I make. I'm as powerful as I allow myself to be. And we forget that. Now, I'm not part of the church anymore, but I come from that Christian tradition. I come from that Christian faith. And so I often talk in times from the Christian perspective because that's my grounding, that's my root, that's where I've come from. But if I'm talking to someone who doesn't come from that faith, I can change the language a little bit. But I say all that to say that I don't throw out my upbringing. For a long time I did. I was really angry with the church. I was angry with everyone. But when the Course in Miracles came into my life, I learned how to love.
Wow.
And it started with me. I had to love myself first. Because how can I be loved to anyone else if I don't love me first? How can I be patient with you or be in the moment with you if I haven't done that for me first?
It's a beautiful concept.
As I started to have more of a spiritual, I put my faith on my theology and my faith, I put it on hold for the moment. I didn't throw it away, I just put it on hold. Because the more I went into I delved into that, the angrier I became. And I'm like, okay, this isn't helping right now, so just put it aside. So I got rid of all the rules, got rid of all the dogma, got rid of shoulds, I got rid of the musts, I got all that, and I just focused on how do I need to be? Who does Chad need to be? Well, who is Chad? Well, I'm the creative God. I'm God's child. That means something, doesn't it? So why am I hurting? Why am I hurting others? When we're in victim mode, we don't realize we're hurting others. We think we're just reacting to the emotional pain we're in,
Yeah.
but that's not really what's going on.
Mm-mm.
And so reciting the theme of your podcast, just love them. I need to love me first, love Chad first, and also stop belittling myself, stop criticizing myself. Because I always thought I wasn't good enough.
Wow.
But because I'm the child of God, I am good enough. I am enough. I'm
Yes.
more than enough. And it doesn't matter what faith I come from. It doesn't matter which church or which religion, Hinduism, Christianity, whichever. We are all children of the Almighty. We are all children of this incredible power, and we forget that. And if that is true, then I can choose my behavior. I realized my behavior was a choice. So I moved from being on automatic pilot of just throwing up on everybody, emotional throw up on people and myself, and said, no, I can choose to behave differently. And I'm responsible for the way I think and the way I feel and the way I behave. And that changed everything for me.
Wow.
And then 2 years ago, I had a near-death experience. Still don't know why it happened. I remember being on the other side, and I remember being enveloped in this feeling of air, this feeling of breath, but it was love. This love, though, showed up in the form of air. And then after, in the couple of years of processing all that, I go, again, there's God. There's that breath thing. There's that air thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're familiar at all with the Jewish language, they don't pronounce the vowels, they only pronounce the consonants, and it's all about the breath. And Yahweh that we get from the Bible, the correct way to pronounce Yahweh is Yahweh. And when you do that long enough, there's a transformation that happens inside of you. And I've been in a room where that's being done. That's the only thing being done, and people are moved to tears. And so I connect all this with meditation. Meditation calms me down. Meditation brings me back to God. It brings me back to myself. It brings me back to connection.
Love it. That's beautiful. I love your story because it reminds me that everyone is searching for
Mm,
something. So a lot of my listeners who they've had loved ones leave their faith and they're mourning that, or they're angry about that, or they're so heartbroken about that. It just reminds me that the ones who've left, they are searching, just like, you needed to leave those churches that you needed to search. You needed
yeah.
to figure it out on your own. You needed to go there. You needed to go through all the processes that brought you to where you are today. Those were all meant to happen,
Oh,
I
absolutely.
believe.
Yeah.
That God's
Yeah.
brought you. He taught, and you couldn't have learned those lessons in other ways had you stayed where you were in your unhappiness. And
Yeah.
so sometimes we have to allow, either we are the ones and we need to get out of what we're doing in order to search and find what God needs us to find, or we need to allow others
Hmm.
to go through the same process.
Yes.
Allow them to get out of where they're at and where they're feeling uncomfortable. Allow them to search. And they're going to come to their own truth over a lifetime, or maybe in the next life. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's God's in charge, and it's in his timing and in his way. It's his journey for each one of us individually.
Hmm.
And I love that you described your journey so beautifully. I absolutely loved it. Such a
Yeah.
beautiful journey. And you're in
Thank
such
you.
a beautiful place now, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't continue my pastoral studies, but I found other ways in which to be able to do that. And I don't go run to spirit as my sanctuary. I did as a sanctuary, but I don't run to spirit or to God to save me from being a victim.
Yeah.
I've transcended being a victim. And with the people some people I've worked with, sometimes they're not ready to get out of victim mode. They think that if they get out of victim mode, then they're not holding the perpetrator accountable.
Yeah.
And that thinking just leaves you stuck.
Yes.
And a lot of people also are not ready to take responsibility for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge one. That is big. You are not going to find the happiness or the peace you're looking for in your life until you take responsibility for you and stop making it about other people. No one else is going to get it right. And I can have a list a mile long of expectations of how I think Cherie should behave, or how I think my parents should behave, or my friend. But those are my expectations, not theirs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And who am I to make you accountable for my happiness? Because that's what I'm really doing. If you behave the way I want you to behave, then I'll feel safe. I'll be happy. Then you and I can get along. And we do this to each other in our religious faiths.
Yes. And when you really think about it, it's so backwards.
It is. And it's not even in scripture.
Yeah.
Nowhere is it in the Bible that says, Sheree, you need to believe like I do, or I need to believe like you do for us to get along and for all of us to go to heaven.
Yeah.
It's not there. Yet we treat each other that way.
Yeah.
And if you're not a churchgoer, take that out. You want the person to believe exactly the way you do, no matter what that belief is, in order for you to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can all get along. The way I believe it shouldn't be threatening to you or vice versa. I loved the interview I just recently heard you do with the doctor, the psychologist. I can't.
Oh, Emil Harker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was beautiful. he's talking about being right, being in the present moment with the person that's in front of us. And if I come in with all my expectations, I'm not being present to you.
Yes.
I am not affirming you, and I'm making it all about me.
Yeah.
How different would this world be if I'm going to make it about me, make it about transforming my life and being a different person, but then meeting you where you are in love?
That is really, really what it's all about. And if we don't get there, and I'm one who in the past has made so many mistakes in that area, but I'm figuring it out like it's a process. But if you don't get there, then you don't get the connection with that
Yes.
person. You don't get the relationship with that person. We all have to figure that out if we care about the relationship.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to use my words, but when you share your story, what I've heard is you and your husband had to transform your thinking so that you could be there for your kids that were questioning and leaving the church.
That's exactly what happened and continues to happen. Like I'm a work
Sure.
in progress, you know?
Because if you're expecting your kids to just do it your way so that they're not in pain, well, you obviously it didn't work.
It didn't work. It
And
didn't
you're
work. And it
not
wasn't
being
meant to
there.
work.
Right. And they're in the middle crying out in pain and confusion, emotional pain. Mom, I need help. Dad, I need help. And
Yeah.
you're not there. You think you're being there for them by going, well, let's take you back to church, or let me remind you of what I used to. That's the very thing they're questioning.
Yes.
That's the very thing that's not working for them.
Yeah. They just need to be loved for who and where they are.
Absolutely. And again, take your faith out of it, take the church out of it. We're not being there in general for each other, no matter what our beliefs are, religious or otherwise. And it starts, and I can't say this enough, and I don't say it enough to my clients, it starts with me. How am I behaving? How am I treating myself? And how am I treating you? Spirituality to me is about my faith, is about my relationship with myself, my relationship with others, and my relationship with God.
Yeah.
Not about how you're getting it wrong and I'm going to tell you how you're doing it wrong.
Right.
There's no peace
Absolutely.
in that.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up, I went through a part of me at a time where I felt like if I was going to accept my children in their different choices, that I was actually compromising my values. And that was
Yeah,
such a false belief. But I was
absolutely.
just so anchored into that in the beginning that
Sure.
that if I was going to accept them, that was somehow violating myself. That's not true at all. And I've learned that since God is all about love. Christ is all about love. And it has nothing to do, I'm not doing anything different myself. I'm making my choices and I'm allowing them to make their choices. And I'm not compromising my values by allowing my child to make their choice. They're
Mhm.
an adult and they have that right. And in fact, it's not only a right, it's a gift that they've been given
Absolutely.
from God. And I have no right to try and take it away from them. So
Yes, that's
I
right.
just wanted to throw that out
Yeah.
because I can just hear there's somebody out there listening who's
Yes.
like, but I'm compromising my values. No, you're not.
Yes.
If
No.
you change what you do, that's changing your values. That's compromising your values. But if you allow someone else to make their choice, that does not compromise your values.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I
You're
just,
you're being as Jesus in that moment.
yeah,
You're being Christ-like. You're doing what he taught us to do.
yeah. It has been delightful to have you on
Mm.
here. I love that you come through your own journey and now that you help other people as a spiritual mentor. Will you take just a minute and tell my listeners a little bit about what you do and how they could connect with you if they wanted to work with you?
Sure. Sure. So I still have felt the call, if I can use that Christian word. And so what has happened is because of the transformation has taken place in my life, I've ended up working with people one-on-one. I also teach people how to meditate, and I do group meditations on Zoom once a month. But anyone that's looking to transfer out of their faith into a more spiritual path, I help them with that. Or someone who is in emotional pain and they're wanting to get beyond that pain, I also help them because the process is still very similar. And it's remembering we are his child. And when you start with that understanding first, you're able to breathe. You're able to calm down instead of reaching out for here or there or for someone else. And I have found that no matter what your religious belief is, no matter what your faith belief is, that when you make the mental connection that I am his child, I am the child of the creator, and that power is inside of me, that changes everything. I can accomplish anything. I can be who I want to be, but that's not always easy.
No.
I also like to say that vulnerability is being authentic, and vulnerability is power. It's not weakness. And so I use all that in working with people. And then because of the gifts, spiritual gifts I have, I'm able to connect with that individual that's right in front of me. And you can call them downloads, you can call them impressions, whichever. I'm able to then, what I'm picking up on the spiritual world, guide them to where they need to go from that point.
Love it. What do you have a website, or how would people connect?
Yes. So the process I use is called the Numa process, using that word again. And so the website is called thenumaprocess.com, and they can also find me on Facebook, just my name, Chad Shober.
Awesome.
So, and if I
Great.
could, I'd like to leave with a poem.
I would love that.
Okay. Another a mystic that I enjoy reading. His name is Rumi, and people may be familiar with him, they may not be, but the poem that I'm about to read describes exactly what we're talking about. You were born with potential. You were born with goodness and trust. You were born with ideals and dreams. You were born with greatness. You were born with wings. You are not meant for crawling, so don't. You have wings. Learn to use them and fly.
Amen. Chad, thank you so much for being here. I love that poem.
You're welcome.
As Chad mentioned, he does a monthly Zoom meditation. He is offering it as a free gift to you. His next one is on April 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6 p.m. Mountain Time where I'm at. So wherever you're listening from, take note of that, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Chad has even graciously adjusted his normal time that he does this meditation to allow those of us farther west to more easily be able to be part of this special session. It's also tax deadline that day, so plan to have your taxes done and be ready to do some relaxing and meditating that evening. I will put the information to sign up in the show notes, so look for them there. But all you have to do to join this wonderful meditation session is go to sheribest.com and fill out the contact form at the bottom of the home page. In the subject line, write meditation. Chad will then send you an email and you'll be all set. Again, you'll find the website link and the instructions in the show notes, so you can easily find it there and sign up. Listeners, thank you for joining us today. If you're already subscribed, if you've already rated this show, thank you. There's one more wonderful thing you could do for those around you. Share this podcast with anyone you know who may be struggling with the issues that we talk about here, and let them know that this is a place where they can get support, help, and solutions that can really benefit them. Thank you for listening, and please join me again next time for another episode of Just Love Them.